economic recovery where middle-class incomes exploded. But that's not what happened. He gave us the worst recovery in modern American history. Again, it's not my opinion. I'm not bashing the guy personally. I don't have any beefs personally against President Obama. That's just a fact. When you look at GDP, growth in what we produce, how you measure any recovery, this is nothing new. Growth in GDP after the recession ended, this is the worst recovery in modern American history since the 50s. There's a reason for that. The taxes, Obamacare, the regulatory load, the uncertainty in the economy. This is not very difficult stuff to figure out. So the blame game is kind of over. I'm getting a little sick of it. But there's a reason that median income has stalled and the middle class is getting really screwed in the country. And by the way, one more thing, because I hear this a lot too, Joe. I get this all the time. They say, oh, well, during the Reagan recovery, the Reagan years, the middle class shrunk as well. One, by the way, that is absolutely outrageous. It's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. People should be embarrassed to say that, number one. His recovery produced GDP growth of 6%, 5%, and 4%. President Obama is barely hits 2%. I mean, it's really a disgrace. This recovery's been a disaster. But this goes to show you another trick by the left, and you got to the listeners out there. You pay attention to this because I hear this talking point all the time. The middle class shrunk under Reagan. Here's what they don't tell you. This is killer. You know why the middle class shrunk? Because the middle class got richer. They moved up, not down. So it's like Dan Bongino is not in the middle class anymore. Man, Reagan really screwed him. No, he's not in the middle class because he makes $100,000 more dollars a year. Right. Look at the data. Look at the raw number of people in the income categories above, not below. It's because they moved into higher income categories, not less. But they do it, and they nail talk show people with it all the time. They go, oh, yeah, that it shrunk. And they go, no, of course it did, because people got richer, you chuckle bunnies.
They were moving on up.
They were moving on like the Jeffersons, man. I mean, come on, guy. It's really silly. So, but I want to explain to the audience here the reasons why this is happening. Because again, with the left, they're just going to lie. Unfortunately, many of them, not all of them, but they do it all the time. I wish they would just be honest, like Bernie Sanders, and say, "Hey, I want to steal all your money." I mean, I don't like Bernie Sanders, his politics, but I respect him for being honest. I just can't believe it. That's going to be the core of the show today. By the way, we'll get to that in a minute. But here's why median incomes are dropping right now. Corporate taxes are high in the country and have gone up. Those corporate taxes are paid somewhere. Corporations, ladies and gentlemen, despite the fact that the left will laugh when you say this, but they laugh out of uncomfortability, not because what I'm saying is untrue. Corporations don't pay taxes. They are tax collectors for the government. They are not individuals in terms of taxes. Now, they're comprised of individual people. But corporations don't pay the taxes. They just collect them. They have to pass that cost on. So what they do is they pass the cost on to middle-class consumers who get poorer each time corporate taxes, which are about 35%. It's not the effective rate. There's a lot of deductions, which I don't agree with, by the way. But the corporate tax rate is one of the highest in the industrialized world. Those costs are passed on to largely middle-class consumers. People who are really rich don't really care, to be honest with you. It doesn't affect them like it affects the middle class as a percentage of their income. That's number one. Number two, compliance costs. The Obama regulatory load, the number of red tape regulations, is at near historic levels with this administration. Oh, it's terrible, Joe. Between the EPA, everything from the Small Business Association to you got HHS, labor, the NLRB. It's just been a litany of red tape, and it's been a disaster. All of these new regulations cost money. I mean, to our small business listeners listening, when you start a small business, you get piles of paperwork. That paperwork takes time. That paperwork, usually you have to contact a lawyer. The lawyer costs money. Well, those things don't really bother big business in the country because they have heavy-duty attorney staffs and accounting teams. They have them on retainer. So for them, ironically, big business, I hate that term, but the left uses it. For big business, it's almost a competitive advantage, regulations, because they know the little guy can't compete with them. They know Joe Armacost and Dan Bongino don't have, $15,000 to have a lawyer look over 55 pages of government regulations where they had to fill out paperwork. These people aren't stupid. So big business actually likes this stuff. I'm not going to say they like it. I don't want to be disingenuous. But it's a competitive advantage for them. So the middle class small business owner, the middle class guy who works in a company, these things get passed down. And ironically, companies, large companies, big business that doesn't mind so much these regulations because it puts small, medium-sized competitors out of business. The degree of income inequality in those companies is larger than they are in small businesses. So you have a double whammy. You have small business owners who are middle class being put out of business. Then you have people who work at big business making less as a percentage of the company, as a percentage of, say, the CEO's pay. Those companies doing better. So again, the middle class gets hammered again. Compliance costs. You have education, school choice. You have school choice, although it's growing, and I think the movement is growing significantly. We have wealthy families that if the public school in their neighborhood stinks, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, they send the kids to private school. Again, not an option for middle class, lower income folks. And in an ideas economy where ideas are worth money, not necessarily the labor as it was, 100 years ago where you could go out and farm for a living. What's in your brain right now has value. The iPhone, all of these things were ideas first. Those ideas aren't forming in middle income and lower middle income communities and poor communities. So again, the gap's getting wider because does President Obama support school choice? No, of course not. Healthcare costs have gone up under Obamacare.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a shocker, right? I know everybody's stunned.
I know. I'm dealing with it now.
Yeah, so am I. I mean, I've been dealing with it too. Now, again, healthcare costs. Do you think people who are really wealthy care so much about this? They probably do, but it's not going to bankrupt them. Most of them are going to concierge-type medicine. There's a good portion of them who said, you know what, I'm done with the whole insurance market. I'm just going to pay cash. So again, all of these things hammer the middle class and have started or been made worse under the Obama administration. So it's very difficult if you're one of our listeners. I mean, unless you're blinded by your ideology. In that case, listen, I'm glad you're listening, but this podcast isn't for you. You need to go elsewhere. Go listen to Chris Matthews or whatever. But that's true. I mean, I feel like with them, I'm wasting my time. Sadly, I wish it wasn't the case, but it is. These things, corporate taxes, compliance costs, also crowd out. Government bonds are crowding out investment, education disparities because there's no school choice, finance, banks and businesses that don't understand what the Fed's going to do next, that have to hedge and spend money on hedging and do all kinds of derivatives contracts, healthcare costs going up. These are things that filter down and hammer the middle class. And again, Obama supporters out there, great. He's your guy. I get it. But you're not living in reality if you think this guy's in it for the middle class. He's not. All right. On that note, there's another story I saw. This Daraprim. Did you hear this story, Joe, about this drug? No. The guy goes out and buys this drug, this young investor, and he hikes the price like 3,000% or something like that. You haven't heard this?
This broke on Friday, I think, late in the day. Did it?
Yeah. You probably got a little bit of traffic on it, but it's interesting. This Daraprim is this drug out there for. I'm not a doctor, obviously, and I don't play one on TV, but it's Daraprim.
Thank God.
Yeah, really, seriously. I think I'd hurt you if I was a doctor and if I was an acting doctor on TV. Be like, wait, he was acting in his doctor role, and he still hurt the guy. But Daraprim is this for toxicoplasmosis or something like that, some kind of rare disease. But Daraprim apparently is one of the only drugs out there. This guy comes in, he buys it, he hikes the price overnight by some ridiculous percentage. Now, again, I'm a free market guy, make no mistake. But why was he allowed to do that? Well, because medicine's not a free market. I mean, I find it odd that the left is having a meltdown over this. Mrs. Clinton's now calling for price controls on drugs. Bernie Sanders is calling for price controls on drugs because of this. This guy, he came in, he bought it, he hiked the price, people are going to die. But what he doesn't understand is, again, this is the unbroken leg fallacy. Look that one up. It's the whole idea that government creates a problem. Then after it creates the problem, government comes in to try to solve the problem the government created by creating more government problems. So government created a market, almost a monopoly, for drug companies with all of their ridiculous restrictions and the fact that government pays about 40% of medical costs in this country. And then when the market, so-called market, air quotes, goes awry, the government goes, look, the market failed. The market failed in medicine. We should try it sometime. There's no market in medicine right now. And interesting. So the Journal had a piece on this, and it talking about negotiation, the fact that That's not the way it works. They're calling for Medicare right now to be to be able to negotiate the prices and to drive these things down. So let me just quote the piece in the Journal. It's by their editorial board. It says, as for negotiation, the Medicare prescription. I have like pre-subscription. I don't know what the heck I did there. The Medicare prescription drug law contains a so-called non-interference clause that prevents HHS from imposing categorical discounts or establishing a national formulary. Bottom line, Medicare can't create a formula legally by law to do that, to price control. But here, this is interesting. Prices in Medicare and elsewhere are brutally negotiated by private health plans and pharmacy benefit managers. One reason the furor over this other drug, was hepatitis C drug, had faded. It was going through the same thing. This Hep C drug was price hiked dramatically. One reason the furor has faded is there are now 3 competing next generation hepatitis C medicines, and prices have plunged. Bottom line, ladies and gentlemen, markets work. We should try them sometime in government and allow people either to access the Federal Employees Health Benefits Program with some kind of a voucher, or allow them to use their own income through HSAs to buy their own insurance and their own drugs and drive the price down. It works. So all this stuff about price controls is nonsense. I mean, read Friedman. Every time the government puts in a price control, in other words, let's say drug A. You can't charge more than $250 for drug A because it's a life-saving drug. Everybody claps. Oh, it's a great idea. It's a great idea. We don't want people to die. Well, what happens every time you institute a price control? You have increased demand. Why? Because the price is not the market price. In other words, let's say a Corvette. If they made a price control, if they put a price control in on Corvettes and said you can't charge more than $30,000. Of course you're going to get increased demand, because people who want a Corvette, who don't have the $70,000 cost for the car now but have 30, are now going to want them. So you're going to get increased demand. Well, what follows next? Decreased supply. Because Chevy's going to say, well, what the heck are we selling these cars for at a loss? It costs us $60,000 to make it. We're losing $30,000 a car at a $30,000 price. We're not going to do that. The same thing's going to happen with the drug. You want drug shortages? Start price controls. What happens next in a price control market? Black markets. Because Corvette dealers say, hey, listen, if we get these cars from the dealer and we sell them for cash and just say they were like destroyed or something, we can get about $55,000 and get a little more money. We may not get to 70, but at least we'll get close. You get black markets every time. Look at the black market for toilet paper in Venezuela happening right. Yes, read that story. Amazing. And then finally, you get quality problems. Why do you get quality problems? Which you're going to get with drugs if you do a price control, just like you get with Corvettes. Because why the heck are people going to build Corvettes at a $60,000 cost if they have to sell them at $30,000? Come on, chuckle bunnies on the left. Think for a minute. If the government could control the cost, why not just make everything cheaper? I think movies should be $2. I think picture frames should be 50 cents. I mean, are you serious? You think it's that easy? You're going to get the same thing every time. Increased demand, decreased supply, black markets, and quality problems every single time. There are easier ways to do this. And not to mention the fact, this is an interesting data point, Joe. The drug companies that produce drugs that save lives in many cases, not all, but in many cases. Did you know of all the research and development money in this country, Joe, that drug companies alone are responsible for 20% of it?
Wow.
Think about that.
I didn't know that.
You have internet companies doing doing research and development. You have entertainment companies. You have transportation companies. You have, energy companies, all doing research and development. Drug companies alone are responsible for 20% of the research and development dollars.
Wow.
That's incredible. Now, again, I'm not saying here in the show, and please don't misinterpret, my words, that this guy made a good move. The guy who bought Daraprim and raised the price like $3,000 overnight, it was a stupid decision. But it doesn't require government intervention. It requires free market. Someone should have said, you know what? I think I can produce a drug for this toxoplasmosis. I'm totally screwing this up. I can produce it for half of what this guy's doing it for, and then he puts the guy out of business. They're called free markets. I mean, that's
plus
the way
the C word, competition.
You would think, Joe, but the left still hasn't figured that out. Okay, another story. This one's just small. I don't want to go into this too much, but it's just interesting because it speaks more about the culture war going on there, going on in America right now. Worst Emmy ratings of all time for the Emmys. Only 11 million viewers. That's really pathetic. I mean, the debates on Fox and CNN got over twice that much. Now, I say that because the guy who hosted it,